Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to our next agenda, which is our panel discussion. The session will be moderated by Jonathan Duckett, the Executive Director of the Malaysian Investor Relations Association, or better known as MIRA. Before his current role in MIRA, Jonathan was the Senior Vice President of Investor Relations, Communications and Sustainability at Bumi Armada, a position he held for almost 15 years. Prior to that, he was the Group GM for Group Berhad and was involved in equity research and sales with BNP Paribas. And now, on to our panelists. Gerald Ambrose is the Chief Executive Officer of Aberdeen Islamic Malaysia Sdn Berhad. Gerald joined Aberdeen Malaysia Sdn Berhad in 2005. Before joining the company, Gerald was an institutional sales director covering ASEAN equities at Kim Eng Securities in Singapore, HSBC James Keppel, and BNP Paribas Securities in London. Next is Christine Lau. Christine is the Head of Investor Relations for Digi.com Berhad. She is an experienced investor relations professional with over 10 years of experience in financial analysis, market research, corporate reporting, ESG profiling, and stakeholder management. She is well-versed in multiple sectors, namely telecommunications, plantation, property, automotive, and heavy equipment. Next, we have with us Crystal Tay, who is the Head of Investor Relations for Sunway Berhad. Prior to her current role, Crystal was the Senior Manager, Investor Relations for Sunway Real Estate Investment Trust. She was instrumental in the formation of the investor relations functions of Sunway REIT. With that, Jonathan and panelists, may I invite you and the panelists up on stage.
Good morning, Dato' Tan Sri, guests. I think it's an interesting topic that we have today. Guidebook 3 is obviously, sorry, my mask. Probably hear me clearer now, maybe not. As mentioned, I've started life as an equity analyst, and then I've spent 20 odd years in and out of IR. So what is covered in Guidebook 3 is obviously close to what I've worked on my whole life. But I think it's also important that we look at all the guidebooks together because they change the structure of how corporate Malaysia operates and how it's seen. There's a lot of activity for IR going forward. The IR role, it's a role or a function. It's not one person, it's how a company reacts. It's about disseminating timely, proactive information. It's about keeping the investment community informed. And it's providing that information, if you like, without makeup, which is kind of the PR role, so that the investment community can really look at a company and make a valued judgment on what that financial outlook is for the company and what the long-term prospects are of the company. Because ultimately, you know, investors want that view, right? They want to understand exactly what the company's doing. And to be honest with you, it's about giving them the risks as well, the challenges and the benefits of putting money into a company. And it's not just for the equity side. The debt side also wants all of that. So a more company provides upfront on the website, in meetings, in presentations, gives any investor that ability to do a very proactive due diligence on a company without having to formally sit down and have an active data room on a non-disclosure basis. So with that, and talking about sort of where the guidebook helps, I think we'll start the conversation around how the development of stakeholder engagement and management and IR has developed. And I think we'll start with Gerald. Gerald, you've been around equities on the sell side and the buy side. Can you tell us a bit about what the Malaysian landscape has looked like before, when you started, and what it looks like now, and how it's developed over time?
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, I have been around for a worryingly long time, actually. We started, when I was started in Malaysia in, I think, 1989. You joined shortly afterwards as analyst, and I was mentioning in the holding room there that your ability to make coffee has improved considerably, you know, from a very low level.
The machines have improved, I have.
Oh, right, okay. So, yeah, I've been in capital markets for 33 years, 35 years, sorry. Exactly half of them on the sell side or as a broker, and half of it on the buy side as a fund manager. About 30 of those years have been spent concentrating on Malaysia. So things have changed radically. I do remember when I first came here, I visited a company without any real knowledge of, you know, they say stockbrokers are probably the highest paid unskilled labor in the world, and I wasn't that well paid then, but I was visiting a few companies, and I think IR was barely existent then. Most companies, just the management would see you, and I remember seeing one company which will remain nameless, and the company representative just answered questions in monosyllables, saying yes, yes, no, and then after 5 minutes the guy said, oh, I can't keep it secret any longer. We just won this contract that's worth 6 times our current revenues, and our costs are very low. The margins we got on this product is fantastic. We're going to become, you know, an international top 100 company. I was scribbling down rapidly and brought out a massive buy recommendation. I don't think Puan Mohayani's forgiven me for it since. Everybody poured into this company, and it turned out that it was a complete fiction, and I'd been suckered. So I'd say that was pretty bad IR. But back in those days, the priority was to invest in companies to make money, to make the share price go up. And it was really as simple as that. And it was really just the investors that you were looking at. I think what's really changed is that that motivation is still there. You still want the share price to go up. But there are many more hurdles to your share price going up than there used to be, in terms of quality of management, balance sheet, honesty, transparency of management, and long-term growth, and increasly, you know, ever since that guy, Ranulph Fiennes, found out that the temperature's gone up in the North Pole, there's climate change. And this, I think even Donald Trump believes that the world is getting warmer. You've got, you know, the main arteries of rivers in Europe drying up at the moment. You can walk along the bottom of the Loire River. The climate change is a real factor. And if you haven't taken into account the changes that are going to happen to the climate and the changes that are going to happen in your obligations to transition to the climate change, then you're in serious trouble. So there's many other factors, and you're answerable not just to shareholders, but there are your own staff. There are your staff and people in the supply chain. There's a community. There's regulators. There's governments. And really, as Tan Sri mentioned, there's a certain national duty. You're representing your country. And here in Malaysia, you know, when I first came here, Malaysia's weighting in the index was, or Asia ex-Japan, Malaysia was about a quarter of it, second largest after Hong Kong. Now it's slightly below 2%, and institutions don't look at Malaysia so much because of that small size and because it doesn't really move the needle that much. We need to work together to improve our reputation and the standing of companies in Malaysia, because we sometimes get tarred with this, you know, this sort of bad public governance that affects the reputation of the country. And I think there's some great companies here. And I was mentioning to people before, living in Malaysia as an expat, and our PR now is the world's greatest, best kept secret. You know, it's a wonderful place to live. It's one place to be based. So I think IR has a key role in achieving that.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Maybe to Christine and Crystal, changes that you've seen in your roles as IR, and how things have developed. Christine, you want to start?
Thank you, Bursa Malaysia, for having me here today, and congratulations on the launch. I think it's really important guidebook for small, medium, and even large companies. For myself, I'm fortunate that I started a career in IR with a company that has strong support for the IR functions. You know, for many companies, IR function is like an afterthought. You don't really need it. You know, they think so. But as we evolve, we realize the IR personnel is an ambassador for the company, right? You must know in and out of the companies. At the same time, you must be able to report accurately so that the stakeholders are able to use the data that you provide to them and make a really informed decisions on your company. Today, what have really changed? I would say COVID is the agent of transformations, not just in the way we digitalize our approach to the investors and analysts, but also the dialogues that we have with investors have changed. We no longer focus on financial performances. We also focus on the way we support our employees, our suppliers, our partners throughout challenging times. And how we tell these stories is through a very structured reporting framework. And I think our challenge most of the time is how do we help our investors and analysts understand our challenge so that they will appreciate more on our efforts and commitments. I would say IR roles have really evolved, but it doesn't mean that we have to get there immediately. It's always a journey, and you always need to map out what is your team focus today, and then how you can be able to communicate and articulate this properly to your stakeholders. We are not answerable to analysts and just fund managers. We are answerable to our customers, our employees, our board of directors, and also the NGOs and government agencies. So having a really holistic stakeholder management, it's incredibly important for a company. And I'm blessed that DG, we have a proper process, how we prioritize each stakeholder group. The way we do it is we engage an external advisor and we undertake a stakeholder prioritization exercise. And this way, you will be able to understand each of their expectations and how they value DG, and you are able to understand where is the material concerns that matter most to them and matter most to us. In this way, when you sit in a meeting with these stakeholders, you can curate your dialogue. You will be able to have a quality meetings within that 1 hour. So that's something that I've seen evolve over the past few years, especially throughout the pandemic period. Maybe Crystal will have similar view as me.
Thanks, Christine. Congratulations, Bursa, for the successful launch of the Guidebook 3. And in Sunway, we are actually very honored and humbled to be part of this transformation journey. Before I start on our narration, right, I would like to crack a joke, if you don't mind. I came from buy-side. I started off in buy-side, where, just like Gerald said, those days, IR was almost non-existent. And the definitions of IR is probably carrying the suitcase of the bosses when they meet PLCs, or as old as I am today, those days we had to carry the portable projector along. So that was the definition of IR when I was on the other side of the world as fund managers.
Plus your 12-kilo Ator.
Yes, and presentation deck in hard copies. So fast forward, with that, when I moved over to the other side of the business, servicing fund managers and the investment communities, I see a lot of potentials in this career, as well as I see the need and the necessity to have IR in every PLCs. Of course, until today, I would say that the challenge of this recognition of the necessity of having a IR personnel is not as progressive as we wish in the capital market, but sharing experience in Sunway, for example, in Sunway we are, and we believe that we are a communicative institutions or organizations. And what does communicative means? It is not only on the PR side of things, but more importantly is on the strategic level of communications. And stakeholder engagement is also very important in the context of Sunway, where our founder, Tan Sri Jeffrey himself, at his current state, he is very actively engaging at various levels of stakeholders in his capacity. So for us in IR, we work in a matter where stakeholders engagement is a priority. So in IR, it is not it's not just sharing information as in when investment community asks us question, we just reply question, that particular questions, or sometimes brush them off when we don't feel like responding the way that they think, when they try to get certain information from us. But more importantly, it is a journey. So the word that I would like to share today, IR is a journey, and it is a journey of not achieving a desired share price. It is not a journey where you think the end target or the destination is the share price. It is a journey. It's a journey of your commitment in professional IR practice, in embracing stronger governance, and also it is all about integrity. Ultimately, it's the business of the PLCs that you are in. Like Christine said, we are the ambassador, and it is our role to uphold the professionalism, the integrity, as well as the strong disclosure governance that we should have in every PLCs. So that is essentially what we think an IR journey should be. In terms of the evolutions that we have been seeing in recent years, the clientele, if I may say, or my stakeholder, for example, in the IR capacity, has somewhat expanded. In the olden days of IR, our core target is usually the institutional investors. But in today's context, with technology and all, we cannot ignore the rest of the world. So hence our stakeholders, our customers, for example, in our business, our hotel guests and retail investors, they are all our stakeholders. So IR also has the role of playing our responsibilities to all across stakeholders in the best platform that we should be engaging them. For example, the institutional is the typical platforms that we have, roadshows, management meetings, one-on-one site visits. Whereas on the retail platform is the interesting part where it is underserved, and it is also uncommon most of the time because we don't usually go directly to the retail investors, for example. Most of the time it's once a year during AGM. But really, if you look hard enough in the social media space, especially, there are a lot of other platforms that that engages with shareholders, retail investors. So whether for organizations, for PLCs, do we or should we start exploring alternatives, platforms like this, in reaching out to the retail investors? Like for example, in Sunway, one of the listed company in Sunway, we have been over the many years actively involved with collaborations with Bursa Malaysia, for example, through retail participations, retail presentations, in educating investors in the context of REIT investments in the company itself, and also through various stock brokers, for example, Rakuten, who are stronger in the retail space. So we actually evolve ourselves in that platform as well to reach out to the wider group of stakeholders and investors. Another evolution that is eminent is definitely on ESG engagements, sustainability, because in the past when investors see us, they ask us about financial performance, business outlook, strategies, and etc. But in today's context, ESG has become mandatory as well. In most of the investors meetings, they will end with, what is your ESG strategy? So it's already something that is so prominent that we cannot ignore, and it is mandatory or compulsory in our IR engagement roles as well. In Sunway, we are trying out pilot to do a Sunway Sustainability Day this year, whereby we think that this will be an avenue for us, alongside with our analysts, with our fund managers, investors, to learn together in this ESG evolution or ESG journey, whereby we exchange ideas. I mean, the plan is we plan to exchange ideas, bring them around Sunway City, show them, demonstrate to them our sustainability projects, initiatives that we had over the last couple of years, and then that from there on, we can exchange ideas and see what, and also it's very important for us to think that in this engagement process, we would like to gauge from the audience, what is the expectation? So feedback is something that we are looking forward to from in our IR engagement. So these essentially are the two major evolutions that I think we are seeing.
Okay. I'd just like to drop back a bit on something that was mentioned and is obviously relevant today, is the use of technology. I mean, especially with COVID, lockdowns, you know, conference calls used to be an occasional thing with a, you know, overseas investor. Now everybody knows about Microsoft Teams and Zoom. And is it likely that things are going to stay on that platform, that you see interaction with investors being, you know, 90% online technology? Or is it going to slowly, as we open up, you're going to see an increasing, more physical interaction again? And how does that play out? So if anybody would sort of like to see where you think that transition is going.
Gerald, you can go first.
Oh, well, I'm no great technological expert. In fact, just before I arrived here, I left my phone in the grab, so you know I'm not exactly the authority on it. But I do think that even I can get the hang of Microsoft Teams and Zoom, and it's definitely an improvement on the way things were. I know, speaking to a lot of people in investment banks elsewhere, you know, IPO road shows used to be a massive, expensive and carbon dioxide consuming activity that they don't need anymore. It can be done by a VC. And certainly I just noticed, you know, we are committed to reducing our own internal carbon footprint to net zero by 2030, and then all our portfolios and everything by 2050. But looking at our own carbon footprint, not having senior management flying around first class everywhere, seeing people face to face, has been one of the major cuts in our carbon footprint over the past 12 months. So I don't think that VCs are going to go away. And they're an important part, but I would just like to emphasize also that you know, site visits, meeting people face to face, or that baby boomer stuff is still important.
Okay.
I think having virtual engagements definitely have its flexibility. You're talking about, you know, repurposing 80% of the IR budget for traveling, and we can reinvest that amount into digital tools. So what we do is we ensure that we invest in the right digital tools, and we make sure all of our management representatives who will be on call are trained. You know, they are trained and they know how to use the digital tools so that we can deliver very effective virtual meetings. So that's what we do. We make sure that there is rehearsals before each meetings. If you ask me if this is the way to go, I would say hybrid. I would still prefer hybrid, because I think that access of the fund manager and analyst access to management is very important. Without them traveling, and by organizing virtual engagement, they can attend these meetings. My C-suite officers can attend this meeting. Secondly, if you're in a particular transaction or a certain event, such as EGM, AGM, or you know, in between M&A activities, that face-to-face engagement is important if you want to meet new investors, if you want to make sure that the new analyst that's covering your stock understand your companies in and out. I think that is when you should have physical engagements. Now, COVID make us stay home. I mean, it literally forces us to stay at home for 2 to 3 years. I think site visits play a very important role, especially for those who just joined the company and they need to understand what it means by, you know, base station. For DG, what is base station? What is tower? How do you control your network? Where is your control centers? So I think we should also maintain an active site visits, probably once every 6 months, and this will give the opportunity for the buy sides, even sell sides, to come and visit your office, to come and visit your, to understand your processes. Yeah, but if there is no need, I would say the future trends of IR is definitely digitalization. Automating your in-house processes, how we report, and how we come up with an IR dashboard. And for DG, we actually disclose this dashboard onto our website. All of our fund managers and analysts, in fact the public, they can just download this Excel And this is your one-stop center. All the P&L, your balance sheet, your cash flow, and operational statistics. We ease their job. They don't have to copy and paste from PDF. They just use the Excel that we provide. And they have the right source of information because this is from us. So I guess I would say digitalization is the way to go. Virtual engagement, it's our style. And if there are any feedbacks from specific group who wish to meet face-to-face, we will definitely address that, because some fund managers, some CEOs, they look into management track record. They want to have the feel and understanding of the management personality as well. We will create that access because that's our role. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. I think going forward, it will be more of a case of a hybrid and on need basis. In general, I would think the migration to virtual will be a permanent feature. It is time, I think it is efficient in terms of time management for both the clients and the stockbrokers, as well as us from the corporate, and in managing the availability of our management as well. Yeah, it's very true. It does reduce quite a bit of carbon footprint, not to mention cost efficient as well. On the physical side, I think the relevance of physical meetings will still be there. For example, site visits is very important to have, especially for regular, in our business, for example, we have new projects, new sites, and those and site updates. Those are relevant updates that we should bring our investment community to showcase to them, continuously update them to show them around. So that part of things should remain. I personally think that at certain point or for certain reasons, sometimes when the buy side or sell side would like to meet the C-suites, for example, because I think when there is a human touch, when there is face-to-face engagement, sometimes it's very different from the virtual engagement, whereby virtual engagement, the certain qualitative elements or attributes may not be as easily exhibited through a virtual call. So on those basis, I think it is still a relevant platform to have physical meetings from time to time. So at the end of the day, my conclusion, I think, is more of flexible. We should be flexible and to suit the needs and the purpose of the meetings, as well as the guests as well. I agree totally with Christine, where cost that has been saved and the carbon footprint that has been saved, right, we can channel them more efficiently, especially in expanding the engagement platforms, especially more of in the through digitalization, through social media, and various other platforms to reach out to the wider crowd of the investment community.
Yeah, I suppose also, although I am a bit of a dinosaur, the world is changing, and as Christine and Crystal both said, that the investor relations community have to handle, maybe institutional clients are an important part, but you're also accessing everybody now, and with interest rates being low, with pension funds all over the world not being able to fund people's retirement, people are going to have to be individually their own investment officers, which means that they have to access financial information and have the information to be able to make properly informed decisions, and that involves new technologies, ability to access public information through the internet we can't say it's going to go away, it's only going to grow.
I want to add, using innovative use of digital tools, it actually helps with investing targeting, especially for the small and medium companies. They don't have to spend money to travel to meet with fund managers from UK, US, but they can just easily send out an invitation to anyone from Bloomberg database, and they can just request for meeting. And this is how you can have a more efficient reach, right? That's, I would say, digitalization really helped in the way of work for IR. DG was actually awarded the Best Innovative Use of Digital Tools by MIRA last year. I think I want to attribute to a new subscription that we recently engaged. This is not an advertisement, but it is a tool called We Convene. What it means is we have an account where I open a meeting request for all Bloomberg clients. If they want to meet up with DG, they can just request and book a preferred slot, and it's automatically synced to my Outlook. And I can literally meet you via Microsoft Teams or Zoom. I don't have to fly to you. And most importantly is I actually generate new contacts. So this is something that I feel useful. Again, I think we talk about changing way of engagement. And also, I would like to add investor reach is greater now with digitalization.
Yeah, I think it's obviously that technology is going to change the way everything operates, including interaction and engagement and management, and it's just going to enhance. The challenge going forward will be the amount of noise that can come back through digital as well. You know, everyone's online, there's lots of noise from retailers, speculation, rumors, and potentially down the road there's going to be the need to address that and filter that, and that will probably be a challenge for soon, not rather than later. There were a couple of points raised about ESG, about carbon footprint, and obviously that's a very topical area that's also covered in Guidebook 2 as well. Jerry, I'm going to start with you again because you've been around and you're on the buy side. What has been the big change with ESG when it comes to how you look at companies, how you evaluate? I mean, as you mentioned, and as we all know that have been on the sell side, the past was always about share price, right? It's always about share price performance. Am I going to make money on the stock? That's the singular goal. Whereas I think today ESG is, you know, from my own experience, used to be a 10-minute conversation in an hour's meeting. By the time that I sort of finished up, it was half the meeting was about ESG. So the emphasis, especially for foreign clients, but also local, I mean, you know, all the local big funds talk about it as well. So maybe you could give us some indication of how important ESG is and how important it's going to go further.
Right. Well, in the first half of my career, it didn't matter at all. You know, we didn't care about the environment, or, you know, whether we sent 4-year-old kids up chimneys to sweep soot, or governance. But when I joined Aberdeen, it does have quite a long governance history, and they did that not to, you know, get brownie points or to as a differentiator for Aberdeen from others, but we're long-term, bottom-up, stock-picking investors, and if you invest in things for the long term, you can't just look at the profitability. You've got to look at the management, its transparency. Are they suddenly going to switch from making cars to developing condominiums without telling you? So governance has always been an important thing. And for us, reputationally, I suppose, you know, we don't want to be found to be investing in large amounts of money in companies that turn out not to be what they were. Well, we have done that, but not deliberately. But I remember we bought shares in an Indian company called Satyam. That during one lunch break, the managing director wrote a letter to all his shareholders saying, sorry, the whole thing's been a fraud, even the bank statements are fraudulent. So you can't do much about that. But so governance has always been a factor. But then I mentioned earlier that even Donald Trump, I think, understands there's global warming. Jeremy Clarkson, all these cynics believe now that the world is getting climate change is making the environment very different, and it affects the business of companies. And we've learned here in Malaysia to our cost that, you know, we had some maybe legacy issues in handling foreign labor. I myself, as a white man, am treated abysmally in this country with terrible racism at every corner. But speaking seriously, if you suddenly have a surge in demand for your product and it involves low-cost labor, it's very difficult to adapt your business to treat those people right. And maybe we fell a little bit behind. I mean, what's frustrating is I think we've now caught up and got ahead of the situation, but we're still seen as committing modern slavery in some extent. But these things are here. We're not doing ESG, as they call it, or socially responsible investing, or sustainable investing, because it's the trendy thing to do, and that we can charge higher fees for it. I think it's just an integral part of a company's long-term performance. And if you don't look at it, you can get yourself in some serious trouble. So we see it as what they call in fund management, a source of alpha. You know, you can get outperformance by visiting the company yourself and understanding whether the management has taken into account the risks and opportunities that changes in climate might be causing, and that legislation is going to change in the future. If you haven't planned for it, you could be stuck with what they call stranded assets. But every sector is different, and there's very hard to be prescriptive about climate change and how you analyze it. But for each sector, we must be confident the management has taken into account the risks that are going to happen and what they're going to do about it. If they haven't done that, then I think it's a dangerous long-term investment.
Okay. Crystal?
Maybe Krista, you can say.
So for us, in Sunway, for example, we have announced our net zero carbon target by 2050 and to halve them by 2030. And what does that mean to us? Of course, in Sunway, I think we are very blessed because the buy-in is across the organization, thanks to the founder, our founder Tan Sri Jeffrey again. So when Tan Sri Jeffrey embraces sustainability from top down, it has been a lot more smoother in terms of implementation of of embracing sustainability in our organization over the entire group. When we first started, to be honest, when we first started a couple of years ago, before the whole world is talking about sustainability agenda, the buy-in at the business level was quite difficult because in the first place, it is totally new to the entire world, and people who handles P&L, what does ESG means to them, what does sustainability means to them. At IR, before we had our group sustainability department, I think a lot of people ask this question: how does Sunway do it, right? Honestly, we start as a journey. We start from scratch. So when before we had our group sustainability department, the IR department's IR personnel were the ones championing sustainability. We were the one who went to the ground with our business units whilst we learn. At the same time, we also share, I wouldn't say educate, but share out whatever we learned with our business unit, and gradually over many years actually to make them finally understand or aware of the importance of sustainability. But since then, fast forward, this becomes a general buy-in across the Sunway group, and today, of course, we are a lot more established by virtue that we even have a dedicated sustainability department. As such, in a way, the IR roles is also a lot more easier because we are facilitated. So what happens is that the group GS, or the group sustainability department, will be the subject matter experts, and they will be managing the entire sustainability agenda in Sunway Group. Whereas for IR functions, what we do is we still get involved and we get involved and we still learn alongside with the GS in most of the initiatives, in most of the ratings, for example, whether it's FTSE, MSCI, S&P, we are all involved in the entire process. But to the level of when it comes to execution, the GS will take over. So that also helps the IR personnel to be equally, if not, slightly less educated than our group sustainability, but we are still able to communicate effectively to the investment community. Of course, when it comes to very specific topics or meetings, we will arrange for ESG-centric specific meeting dedicated for the investment community on request basis. So we will have a separate meeting on IR solely on sustainability and ESG when the need arises. Yeah.
Christine, would you like to add more?
The panelists and John. I think, let me start by saying responsible business is one of our key strategic pillars. So ESG has been fully embedded across all value chains in DG. But let me just be very honest with you all. does the investors and analysts fully understand what ESG means? So it's your role. You need to help them to narrow it down to the matters that really matters most to your company. So with this, for DG, we have a very proactive ESG engagement strategy. Every quarter, we have a ESG specific meetings. And this is where we can deep dive into topics that matters most to DG. For example, the previous quarter, we focused on climate actions and human rights. The quarter before, we focused on supply chain sustainability, data privacy, and security. So you break it down for them, and then we will tell our initiatives, and we will let them know our roadmap, how we're gonna, what we're gonna do in order for us to get there, right? So that's something that we do differently. Now, secondly, everybody fear most about reporting. There are just so many ESG standards, framework, a lot of rating assessments coming to your door, and you don't know which one is important and what must you adhere to and comply to. So I would say if we can take a step back, really analyze your sustainability data points and try to perform a gap analysis, benchmarking against, for example, Dow Jones Sustainability Assessment to see, are you there yet? So for DG, that's what we did. We engaged an external advisor. We put down all of our sustainability data points just to understand where we are now with ESG reports. And then we bucket it into teams, human rights, sustainability, yada, yada, environmental management, carbon. And from there on, you will have some sort of reporting framework, and your head of departments, your teams are fully aware how to capture these data accurately. And then your management will understand what are the better stories for us to carry out, and where is the money that we can spend to improve some of these areas. So this inside-out approach is something that is very important for all companies to take. And we cannot let investors and analysts to force you, to pressure you to commit into ESG. It has to come from within. So that's what we believe. And hence, when you have questions from Gerald and the folks, why you're not putting enough focus in climate, then you let them know, because we are prioritizing on this, but it is within our roadmap to focus on climate. So let me be frank, DG, we are still assessing on net zero target, because we are in a merger transaction, right? We are going to merge with Axiara's, Celcom Axiara Berhad, if all the necessary approvals is required. But that is where we can sit down and really assess the bigger picture. And I think as IR officer, it doesn't mean you have to answer to them today. If you don't have the answer today, you just be frank and let them know that this is what we're looking into, and we'll get back to you. Because at the end of the day, you are held accountable for the things that you share to the investment community. So that's my take on ESG perspective.
Okay. I would add, it's a living thing that is constantly changing, and therefore it's difficult to set hard and fast rules saying you must achieve this by this date. An example would be, we didn't know at the beginning of this year that Russia would start its special military operation against Ukraine, and that they would start to close the tap on gas to Europe, and everybody in Europe was way too dependent upon Russian natural resource, Russian fossil fuels. But they've had to switch to source some of their energy from coal and maybe reconsider nuclear energy in order to stop people dying this coming winter, perhaps. So you have to change rules, but you can't go too far. I think there's a report by an American house saying that weapons manufacturers should be considered ESG compliant, because although they manufacture things that kill people, they're for defense, not offense. So sometimes greed takes over from what makes common sense. So you have to sort of take a sense check sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's about having a proper roadmap about where you're trying to get to. I think the current ESG, if you look at it, perception is that everyone should be on an electric car, for example, right? Electric cars are great for the environment because you don't fill them with petrol. But if you look at the statistics as an example, to charge an electric car takes anything, the equivalent power from your plug of running a 1 horsepower aircon for 3 to 4 days. So that power is being burnt and consumed somewhere else. It's just not in your car. So everyone switching to electric is going to cause major problems for the grid. So it's a bit of a misnomer in that way. So in the same way, ESG sounds great. You can have the best report, but are you actually doing it? And what's it going through? So I think, how are we doing for time? Yeah. So you want to, I think we're out of time now, or do we have, yeah? So we'll open up for questions. Have any questions from the floor? Got quite a few years of experience up here. Probably most in the middle seat.
Ageist, actually, which is politically incorrect.
I meant experience from everyone, Jerry. Don't be sensitive. No questions? If there's no questions, maybe I'll put them on the spot one more time. Just in terms of things like, if you could give us some examples of obviously the topical one is also crisis management. What do you do when the wheels fall off? And have you had experiences in that? And how did you address it? Maybe just quickly. Anyone want to start? Jerry, from investments, where investments have gone horribly wrong, and for you guys from a company where, I mean, there's obviously something that's happened recently with Digi where everyone was surprised, or maybe not. How do you deal with those situations?
Yeah, I mean, we are active bottom-up fund managers, so we visit companies and we assess the company's balance sheet, whether they have a competitive advantage, whether their free cash flow is enough to fund their growth over the next 5 to 10 years, and then whether they're transparent, and all sorts of, whether they've considered the risks of climate change, etc. But occasionally, you get it wrong. And it can be, very embarrassing. I think covering up is probably not a good thing to do. Yeah. You've just got to come out and tell the truth. Yeah. I remember in the run-up to the .com bubble in 2000, everything .com and tech went flying through the roof, and everything not tech did particularly badly. And Aberdeen at the time, and still, is a bit reluctant to invest in something that isn't yet profitable. Yeah. And maybe there's, huge gearing in order to see that growth, but there's no profitability at the end of the time. It was a PR nightmare not to buy these .com companies, as the rest of the world outperformed you massively. Yeah. So, you have to come out and tell the truth on that. And similarly with this Satyam computer issue that we had when the guy announced over, I remember, a Wednesday lunch that he had been lying, that even somehow he had persuaded the auditors to say that there was several billion US dollars in the bank account when wasn't there. So you have to communicate with your stakeholders and your clients that you'd made a mistake, and that you had or were in the process of correcting it and keeping them updated. But I think not lying or not covering up, not being economical with the truth don't hide things is a key factor.
I think for us, having a war room addressing crises is very important. In the event of crisis, this war room should comprise of leader management, the relevant C-suites that is in charge of this particular crisis, and of course the corporate communications team, the IR team. What you need to have is really understand what actually happens, right, for the crisis, and come up with a holding statement, what can be shared to the media and analysts. Because at the end of the day, you will regret if things are shared inaccurately, and if it's being reported, and at the same time your management will hold you liable for misinformations. Secondly is that don't jump on the gun, don't gun jumping, and don't speculate. If there is any media reports out there pointing out to a certain news or events of the company, try to refrain yourself from commenting and just say that we don't speculate in media reports. And then at the same time, go back to the war room and really understand how to address this better, because you don't want to hold on to that message forever. You will lose your credibility. Yeah. Okay. So that's how I would approach in crisis.
Anything to add quickly? No? We have a question from the floor if you...
I'll do a quick one.
Yeah, just quickly.
I think in terms of the crisis, I will not dwell in the crisis management. I think the team, crisis management and crisis communication teams will be represented by the various divisions across different levels. But perhaps I share more of our most recent crisis in terms of COVID and how we, how IR practices has been performed or conducted in Sunway group of companies. Essentially, I think it's a time that many of us have not seen in our life. As such, one natural tendency is when times are bad, don't say anything or don't meet investors. That's the best way or best approach to have in most companies. But for us, we think that through good days and bad days, whether good news, bad news, we continue to communicate. And where in this instance, I think IR professionals, we also have a role to communicate with giving comfort level to our management, internal stakeholders, that communication shall be performed accordingly, because I think there could be fear where IR professionals do not know how to communicate, and that's where we will be at the risk of reputational risk and also any implications. So what happens is that we continue with our conversations, with our communications periodically. We share outlook, even though outlook were not good for the last 2 years. We share about the possibility of lower financial performance and how we mitigate the risk, I think, which is very important. And one area which I advocate very strongly is that it doesn't matter if it's a bad news, it doesn't matter if it's a crisis, neither does it matter if your financial performance declines. But I think where the appreciation from the stakeholders is that how we mitigate it, what are our strategies, and are we doing the necessary, taking sufficient strategies, taking the sufficient initiatives to address what we are facing. So I think that is more critical in the engagement process rather than worrying about the negativities. Yeah, and that's where we build trust, long-term trust, and also that's where we build our integrity as well. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, we take the floor question.
John, hi. If I may, since no one is asking questions, I have two questions. One is to Christine and Crystal. Would you participate in an investor conference organized by a broker which has a sell call on your stock? Okay, and that's number one. Number two, for Jerry, would you prefer separate investor sessions with fund managers, or you don't mind having media in the investor session as well with the fund managers? Thank you.
Thanks, Ansri, for the question. Maybe I'll take it first. The first question, no, DG don't practice preferential treatment. We should always have equal access to all parties. So in these instances, event invitations from any brokers that have sell calls from us, we should extend our support. More often than not, they end up appreciating our company more, and it will help them to achieve the fair valuations on our stock. So the simple answer is, I will still attend all broker events. Yeah.
Likewise here, we do not have preferential treatment regardless of any call. Actually, to add on, right, we also believe very strictly on professionalism. Hence, I think Gerald may know, or some of you may also could have come across, whereby questions like, should we comment on analyst report? Should we give feedback if we are not happy with their recommendation or target price? In all this, we don't do, because our role is to communicate, and our role is also we communicate, we represent the company as an ambassador, but the analyst has their own professional role to play in making their own evaluations on the listed company. So whatever the outcome is, we should accept as it is. And if it is a sell call or if there is concern, I think it's our responsibility to see if there's anything that we can do to address the concerns from the business perspective. Yeah.
I think if I can add, if I may, so analysts who have sell calls on you could be a couple of reasons, and some of them may due to their on restricted mode because the banks are our advisor for projects. But because they don't update their forecast, they don't update their modeling, it affects the Bloomberg consensus. So the general fund managers and analysts will be downloading Bloomberg consensus report, but it's further way down by analysts who are on restricted mode, who doesn't refresh their modeling. So it is our role. When I see sell call, I will actually get in touch with them and sort of pressure them to update their modeling, despite the fact that they are on restricted mode. This is a very important way for you to ensure the fair valuation that you have on Bloomberg Terminal reflects what your company is providing today. Yeah.
I think if I could just add 1 minute. I mean, I think it's important that companies engage with people that are making contrarian calls, understand where their contrarian view is coming from, because they may be looking at it at a very different angle or have a different insight into what is changing that, giving that negative sentiment. So the company has to engage with them, understand it. You can't make them change their call, but understand what is driving that decision. I think that's critical. And building that communication trust where, ultimately it could change how everyone else views the market going forward. So you need to get as much information about situations as you can.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's our KPI to maintain a fair percentages of buy and hold calls, for the company. So maybe Gerald, on the second question by Tan Sri.
Thank you, Tan Sri. Well, I suppose in an ideal world, Aberdeen, as a bottom-up fund manager, likes to see the management of a company as well as other representatives of the board of directors of a company. We were lucky enough through the IIC to have the entire board almost of Bursa in a meeting last week. And one-on-one is very useful for us, not because we want inside information, I don't think, but maybe we might need to know stuff that would simply drive other people around the twist with boredom if we did it in a public meeting. And Aberdeen itself, we're a fund management business, but we have to get new clients for whom to manage funds. And if we used fund managers every time to come out and talk to and do the business development side of our business, then they wouldn't be doing what they do properly. So I quite understand how investor relations is a key part of a listed company's business. And so we're quite happy to meet with IR representatives, provided they do provide, and work hard on providing a fair reflection, a true reflection of what's happening, to give proper guidance. I think some of the dangers of IR people over the past is sometimes they get a little bit over their skis in the sense that they start to talk about things that they might not be confident about. I've done it myself, saying, we do amazing things that we don't actually do. So that's a risk. But really, we're quite happy to, and we do attend a lot of conferences organized by brokers in which everybody's allowed to attend, but maybe within those broker conferences there are one-on-one opportunities with various members of management and the financial side to get maybe a special insight. But we're quite happy to attend meetings with lots of other fund managers, journalists, etc.
Are there any other questions?
Hi.
There's a question. Yep.
Yeah, this question. Thank you for a very insightful discussion. But I guess at the end of the day, what gets measured gets done, right? So I guess the question is from an investor relations perspective, stakeholder management perspective, what's your definition of a successful IR effort? And are there ways to actually measure that success in your organizations? Thank you.
Very heavy questions. Thanks, Raj. You want to go first?
Yeah, okay. That essentially asking what's my KPI like. No worries. Like I always emphasize, share price should not be a KPI. That's number one criteria of an IR KPI. But on a serious note, I think there are IR functions has a very interesting way of not being measured. I have always asked myself, what is the best way to measure the success of an IR personnel? You know, unlike a salesperson, for example, you have a sales target, but in our case, share price performance may or may not be directly or even indirectly linked to our performance. It could be purely because of financial performance. So hence, that said, there are still various ways of measuring the level of effectiveness in an IR program. For example, if we have done an exercise of expanding investor space. So from there on, like what Christine said in DG, you have your investors target groupings or strategies. So that's where we measure the strategy. We develop the strategies and we measure the effectiveness of the growth over a period of time. For example, if let's say foreign investors, it may or may not be linked to our efforts, but indirectly somehow we believe there should be certain correlation in these efforts. For example, expanding foreign investor space, expanding retail investor space. So that's where we put in the efforts and the programs to activate these efforts. And from there on, over a period of time, perhaps a year or two from there, we'll try to measure the effectiveness of these projects or programs. Other than that, I think another way is feedback mechanism. Feedback mechanism as in with very proactive IR engagement that an organization does over a couple of years, especially if those companies are coming from the low base where have not been active in IR activities. When you start activating the IR program, then that's where I think after 2 years of activation, it will be good to activate another feedback mechanism, checking around with the stakeholders that we have engaged in the last 2 years to have a feedback sessions, whether through online survey. But personally, in my opinion, online survey is not a very effective tool in this measurement. It will have to be focus group or face-to-face feedback to seek the feedback of institutional investors on their on how they find the IR journey has been. Has there been any changes, any improvement that you see following the activation of the IR program in the perception of the company, in the communication of the company, and how has it helped the investment community have better access to the management, or including the quality of communications? Yeah, it's not just the activation in terms of how many meetings you have, but it is the quality of the engagements that we have that is very important to seek those feedback, and that is one way of measuring our effectiveness of the IR program.
So I don't want to repeat what Krista has said. I think I fully agree on that. There are a lot of qualitative measurements that we can have, quantitative measurements. Bulk of the IR roles is very interpersonal skills as well, rely on interpersonal skills as well. So, but I think what really important is, so long as information about your company is well received by the external parties, by our stakeholders, that's a positive sign. Your program is doing well, you're on track. Secondly is, I think feedback receiving is very important. I tend to disagree. Online surveys for us play a very important role. We engage with internal audit team. We actually conduct IR effectiveness survey. We have a questionnaire every year which we send out to all of our mailing lists, and they will need to address, answer, and their responses will be calibrated by our internal audit, and the summary of it will actually be sent to management and board of directors. So this top-down approach, it gives our management level and the directors a greater oversight of whether our IR programs is actually effective or not. And IR is a journey. You may think you are successful today, and then next month there's something new. So I guess the KPI should always evolve and following the trends and the focus area of the marketplace, capital markets. Yeah.
I think just adding to that, I think it's important that companies do a survey with all the investors, including all those that you've met. You get direct feedback, are they a stakeholder, why they're not, what changed their minds, why have they gone from a buy to a sell. So an annual survey of all your stakeholders actually gives you direct feedback, and that feedback then goes up to management on here are the issues that the company faces with investors, whether it's perception, debt burden, concerns, things like that. It comes directly from the people that are actually going to put money on the table, as opposed to the noise from the market. I think we're running out of time. I think probably just close, if I could close very quickly, just say, all companies should have IR, right? You need it in the company to give that communication channel. But what is critically important is IR can't function on its own. It needs all management, all boards to be fully engaged. Otherwise, it just becomes a portal trying to do a job that is not supported by the people that actually really make the decisions of the company and work together to change that perception of that company. So I think that's a sort of a key message. And I know if you don't have a supportive management and board, it's going to be very difficult on what you communicate, and how you can engage. And I think for you, it's probably also the access to management to check what is IR saying. Is that gelling exactly with what the company's talking about as well? Yeah. So I think with that, I think we'll run out of time. Thank you very much for coming. Hope we've given you some insights. If there's anything that you would like to ask us, I think we're going to be around for a few minutes. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for moderating the session, and to all of panelists, thank you for sharing your perspective.